Mccormack and Yager Taxonomy and Process Skills in Science. Science Technology Society (STS) movement. Changes in the past 2 decades of goals for science education in schools have induced new orientations in science education worldwide. One of the emerging complementary approaches was the Science Technology Society or STS movement. Science Technology Society (STS) is recognized as reform in science education across the world. STS has been called the current mega trend in science education. It is a paradigm shift for the field of science education. The success of science education reform in India too depends on teachers' ability to integrate the philosophy and practices of current programs of science education reform with their existing philosophy. In connection with the Science Technology Society movement, Mccormack and Yager 1989 of United States of America proposed their 3 domains based on their critique of the present state of science education. The Yager's classification emerged out of science education reforms and National Science Education Standards, otherwise called NSES in US in 1990s. NSES is the blueprint to Science Technology Society approach. National Science Education Standards were guided by STS approach and research in cognitive science. Science, Technology and Society is an interdisciplinary field of study that seeks to explore and understand the many ways that the modern science and technology shape modern culture, values and institutions on one hand, and how modern values shape science and technology on the other. STS may be defined as an integrated approach to science teaching. This approach sees the most important goal of science education as production of scientifically and technologically literate graduates enabled to work towards optimal and sustainable global society, enabled in dealing with health issues, sustainable future, environmental degradation and new energy resources. STS approach to curriculum addresses a broad range of environmental, industrial, technological, social and political problems. In instruction, this approach incorporates appropriate STS knowledge, skills, attitudes and values. Mccormack and Yager classification emphasize on learning than teaching, stopping teaching science, focus on learning than merely teaching the curriculum. Mccormack and Yager classification of science process objective is for assessing teaching learning successes in multiple domains of science and science education. It reflected cognitive science research of decades preceding 1980s. It is based on an analysis of the fundamental activities that define science. For example, George Gaylord Simpson had identified the important activities that characterize the scientific enterprise in 1963. For example, George Gaylord Simpson had identified the important activities that characterize the scientific enterprise in 1963. They are: 1. Asking questions about objects and events in nature. 2. Offering explanations that account for natural phenomena. 3. Seeking evidence for the validity of proposed explanations of the natural phenomena. 4. Presenting the evidence through experiments, logic and observation to support explanations. And 5. Communicating the results and ideas to the established Academy of Scientists. These activities define science as a discipline of action, that a body of knowledge. The outcome of this action, according to this view, is not science but the product of sciencing. Likewise, Richard Feynman 1964 reminds us that content of science comes from the success in the actions in sciencing. Feynman posited 3 categories of knowledge about natural universe. 1. Aspect of universe of which we are curious but we don't know. 2. Things we know but which are not so. And 3. Things we are ignorant of, which we don't even know that we don't know. It is clear that the aforesaid processes and categories of knowledge should guide students in science. STS approach emerged in 1990s. Technology is defined as the focus on human-made world with the process of science we have discussed just now. The difference between science and technology is that unlike in science, in technology the end point is in foresight. Technology results in products and procedures, while science results in new information and explanations. This is because in the human-made world of technology, we know what we want, for example, more food grains, faster transport, but in natural world, we have to take as it is, as mentioned in the 3 knowledge categories of Feynman. Yager's suggestions on system of science education. Apart from science technology society approach, Yager's taxonomy is based on the criticism of present system of science education and his vision on changes in instruction to support effective learning. Let us see his views in these respects. Yager raised the following criticisms against the system of science education in 1990s. 1. Scientific literacy has become a major goal of science education, but this is meaningless if learners do not know how to use scientific knowledge and scientific ways of thinking in order to live a better life and make rational social decisions. 2. There is no consensus regarding what kinds of science content are necessary for scientific literacy. 3. Science had been viewed as a body of knowledge consisting of facts, figures and theories, and this led to science instruction characterized by presentations of factual information. 4. Most students graduate from high school without a single real experience with doing science. 5. Science education that stressed what they called the knowing and understanding domain limited students in developing the level of scientific literacy demanded by the needs of society and the world. 6. Typical school programs focus attention exclusively on the what scientists agree to be known and accurate, and to a lesser degree how they know. 7. Though science facts are clearly important, to memorize facts as if their acquisition is the sole purpose of science education violates the spirit and nature of science. 8. Typical of science tests were questions that assessed factual recall types of knowledge. 9. Creativity manifested in the questioning and hypothesizing and attitudes present in students before entering schools worsens the longer students undergo typical science courses in schools. To remedy the aforesaid drawbacks of science education and to support effective learning, National Science Education Standards in US list 9 changes in instruction. 1. In treatment to students, there needs be less emphasis on treating all students alike and responding to the group as a whole, and more emphasis on understanding and responding to individual students' interests, strengths, experiences and needs. 2. In curriculum, there needs be less emphasis on rigidly following it and more emphasis on selecting and adapting it. 3. In classroom, focus there need be less emphasis on acquisition of information and more emphasis on understanding and use of knowledge and processes. 4. In teaching, there needs be less emphasis on presenting knowledge through lecture demonstration and more emphasis on guiding active and extended inquiry. 5. In feedback, there needs be less emphasis on asking questions to recite and more emphasis on opportunities for discussion and debate. 6. In tests, there needs be less emphasis on factual information at the end of the unit and more emphasis on continuous evaluation of understanding. 7. In classroom management, there needs be less emphasis on maintaining classroom by authority and more emphasis on shared responsibility. 8. In social cohesion, there needs to be less emphasis on competitiveness and more emphasis on classroom community with cooperation, shared responsibility and respect. Teacher needs less emphasis on works alone and more emphasis on working with other teachers to enhance science learning. And 10. In assessment, there are many changes required. There needs to be less emphasis of what is easy and more emphasis on what is more valuable. Less emphasis on discrete knowledge and more emphasis on rich, well structured knowledge. Less emphasis on knowledge of scientific vocabulary and more emphasis on scientific understanding and meaning. Less emphasis on revealing what students don't know and more emphasis on what students understand. Less emphasis on achievement only and more emphasis on achievement plus opportunity to learn. Less emphasis on end of term assessment and more emphasis on ongoing assessment. And less emphasis on assessment by experts and more emphasis on teacher involvement in assessment. Domains of science education. Mccormack and Yager in 1989 proposed 6 domains for evaluating success in science teaching. The 6 domains form an assessment framework for science learning, and experiences to promote science literacy can be organized around these 6 domains. These domains represent areas and provide a basis for determining goals, curriculum strands, instruction and assessment. Let us first list the 6 domains. While listing the 6 domains of science education, imagine that the 6 domains are represented in 3 concentric rings like a bull's eye. Each ring represents 2 complementing domains of science learning. The first 2 domains, concepts and processes, are in a central position, forming the center of the bull's eye. They are the typical focus of 90% of traditional teaching, but yet directly used by a minuscule of human population. 2 enabling domains surround the bull's eye model. The enabling domains are creativity and attitude. Creativity is manifested in questioning and hypothesizing. Creativity and attitudes are the 2 enabling domains because they represent abilities all students have even before entering schools. Human brain is at work responding to the natural world while still in the mother's womb. We cannot afford not to focus on the enabling domains of attitudes and creativity. They should be enhanced to make science learning more effective, and hence the name enabling domains. Mccormack and Yager hold that enabling area is where the primary activity of science learning ought to be concentrated. According to them, there can be no science if there are no questions, no curiosity and no interest in learning more about the nature. The next 2 domains forming the outer ring of the bullseye are supportive domains. They are applications or use of concepts and processes in new contexts and connections, or examining the philosophy, history, sociology of the whole enterprise. The domains are intended to support and anchor science. For this, instruction and experiences that provide learning opportunities in these areas are necessary. This will enhance for student understanding in science. Let us discuss the 6 domains in some detail. You may specially attend to significance of each domain to science learning. Focus of each domain, structure or elements of each domain, role of instruction in relation to each domain and possible evidences for assessment of the domain. 1. Concepts. As said earlier, concepts of science along with the processes of science are central to science teaching. Concepts domain is about knowing and understanding. Focus of this domain is scientific information, that is facts, concepts, laws, hypotheses and existing theories accepted by the scientific community. Science categorizes the observable universe into manageable units for study and to describe physical and biological relationships. Ultimately, science aims to provide reasonable explanations for observed relationships. This entire information is usually classified into manageable topics. A basic goal of science education is to help students construct an understanding of the natural world. Science concepts are central to science instruction. Students' understanding of these concepts is crucial to successful teaching and learning. For this, students' prior knowledge should be the starting point for instruction. Conceptual systems are primarily structured via hierarchies. Students may best learn these concepts through a curriculum that is conceptually sequenced for developing student understanding. Students should have concrete experience with concepts before moving to abstractions. Students need opportunities to try and to do, not just to read about science. Learning should promote conceptual linkages instead of concepts in isolation approach. Concept mastery is an essential aim. But Yager adds that concept domain is an essential aim only when a meaningful context has been established. The evidence that science concepts have been learned can be seen most clearly when students can use concepts in a real life or real world situation. Process domain and process skills. The most important contribution to science education practice from Mccormack and Yager taxonomy of domains of science education, at least in India, is the detailed account of process domain. Scientists use certain processes or skills. Being familiar with these processes concerning how scientists think and work is an important part of learning science. Process domain is often designated as inquiry skills. Process domain is on exploring and investigating and discovering. Focus of this domain is processes of science, how scientists work and think. Inquiry skills are also necessary for dealing with everyday life, and such skills play a role in the development of an understanding of the natural world. Teaching of the processes requires hands-on and minds-on activities, laboratory inquiries and experiments. Contexts in which the inquiries are set are important in helping students connect the inquiry skills to their personal experiences. Relating the processes of science to contexts prevent students from seeing the processes used in doing science as entities used only in science. The application of process skills in a variety of contexts supports the understanding of nature of science as well. The process domain include 13 generally accepted processes that scientists use as they accomplish their work. The 13 processes need not always occur individually in definable or identifiable ways. These processes and skills are embedded in knowing, doing and thinking in science. Process skills used in science are 1. Observing and describing, 2. Predicting and inferring, 3. Using space and time relationships, 4. Identifying and controlling variables, 5. Classifying, grouping and organizing, 6. Constructing instruments, simple devices and physical models, 7. Interpreting data, 8. Using numbers and quantifying, 9. Formulating hypotheses and hypothesis testing, 10. Measuring and charting, 11. Defining operationally, 12. Communicating and understanding communication with others, and 13. Experimenting. The process domain, as is evident from pooling along with the concept domain, is inseparably linked with knowing and understanding of science concepts. The prior knowledge and the conceptual framework that already exist in a person's schema influence the nature and depth of observation, irrespective of the accuracy of such conceptual frameworks. Observations are made within the context of already existing conceptual framework. For example, what a person can see depends on what he or she believes. Hence, beginning point of all investigation in processes domain should be based on student ideas and questions. Further, for developing the process skills, instructors need to ensure that instead of finding the one right answer in the conventional mode, laboratories and experiments should provide opportunities for students to test their own ideas. To do this, student-generated ideas can be used as the basis for the question or hypothesis for investigation. Yager testifies that such students who understand the role of process skills in scientific investigations may be more likely to see science as a career. Domains of attitude, creativity, application and nature of science. Attitudes, as we know, deals with feeling and valuing. The focus of this domain, according to Yager and Mccormack, is sensitivity, societal issues and impacts. Attitude domain of science has to cover exploration of human emotions, expression of personal feelings in constructive ways, and decision making about personal, social and environmental issues. It also deals with development of more positive student attitude towards science in general, science in school and science teachers. This domain is on an I can do it attitude and development of sensitivity to and respect for the feelings of other people. The positive I can attitude and I enjoy are important in enhancing students' efforts to seek answers for their own problems and lessen their reliance on others. Two general categories of attitude domain are distinguishable. 1. Attitude towards science, which include interest in science, attitude towards scientists and attitude towards social responsibility in science. 2. Scientific attitude including open-mindedness, honesty and skepticism. There is a special significance of this enabling domain for science teaching. Yager observes that interest in science tends to decline as students experience more science, especially in the middle school years. Hence, science educators need to work to retain student interest in science and need to consider changing both instruction and assessment practices. The fourth domain is creativity. This enabling domain deals with imagining and creating. Most science programs view a science program as something to be done to students to help them learn a given body of information. Creativity is the process of becoming sensitive to problems, deficiencies, gaps in knowledge, missing elements, disharmonies, identification of the difficulties, the search for solutions, making guesses of possible solutions, testing and retesting of these hypotheses, modifying and retesting them if necessary, and finally communicating the results. The focus in assessment and teaching for this domain needs to be on idea generation, designing and problem solving. Richness in experiences via provision of open environment in the classroom, accepting students' ideas and encouraging out-of-box thinking of students are important in inculcating this domain. Students may be provided with opportunities for visualization and production of mental images, generation of metaphors, combining objects and ideas in new ways, open-ended questioning, solving problems and puzzles, consideration of alternative viewpoints, designing devices and machines, generation of unusual ideas and multiple modes of communicating results. The fifth and supportive domain, application, focus on what is learned to do science, connection to everyday life, informed decision making. A key element of application is extent to which students can transfer and effectively use what they have learned to a new situation in their own daily lives. The importance of this domain lies in students using concepts and processes in addressing new problems beyond familiar context in relation to which they learned such concepts and processes. Applying what they have learned to new situation is really evidence of students' understanding of a concept. Students may use applications in school or in daily life. Crucial factor, especially in applying new information to daily life, is the ability to choose the concepts and skills that are pertinent and relevant for dealing with the novel situations. This is facilitated by an issue-based approach wherein science learning is based on students' concerns in the so-called real world. The area in which students live can serve as the venue in which to learn science. For example, if students live in an area of backwaters, science can be experienced in the context of backwaters. This diminishes the learning gap between the world of school science experiences and their personal and societal experiences. Application is evidenced in the following behaviors such as critical thinking, open-ended questions, seeing instances of scientific concepts in everyday life experiences, use of scientific processes in solving daily problems, applying learned science concepts and skills to everyday technological problems, understanding scientific and technological principles involved in household technological devices, making interdisciplinary connections, integration of science with other subjects, decision making related to personal health, nutrition, lifestyle, and judging mass media reports and the like. The sixth and the last domain, connections or nature of science, is a supportive domain. Connections relates to nature of science, explained as the scientific endeavor and a societal endeavor of the whole human race. Nature of science is manifested in ways science differs from other ways of knowing. The focus of teaching and assessment of this domain is history and philosophy of science, how science progresses and science knowledge and understanding develop. How scientific knowledge has developed and the roles scientists have played during the process are two fundamental aspects that are important for students to know. Raising students' awareness and developing an understanding of these aspects should be included in science learning. Instruction in a science classroom should reflect the tentative nature of scientific knowledge. Students need to see that scientific knowledge is not a truth to be discovered in the natural world, but rather a man-made explanation. Students need to see that such human explanations are subject to influence of social factors. Thereby, students will see that science is not purely objective. Students realize that science is human activity that engages real people, often through collaborative efforts in reviewing, challenging and defending the explanation one another. Group work, reporting findings, discussions and reaching consensus are parameters involved with the nature of science domain. Nature of science domain must be evidenced in teaching and learning of science. Yager has put forward a science education pyramid of 6 C's in an attempt to link 6 ideas required for meaningful learning. This will help teachers to connect science with life of the learner and life in the society. The 6 C's are curiosity, creativity, content, constructing meaning, context and collaboration. Curiosity can be aroused through questions and personal interest. Science education needs to begin with curiosity, which is rare in traditional curricula. Traditional curricula start instruction with content, which are judged big for some reasons. Creativity evidenced in asking questions, seeking answers and providing evidences of validity requires debate and dialogue among people. Content is information needed for actions, understanding and problem solution. Content should not be predetermined and needs to emerge from activities. Constructing meaning requires mental engagement, meaning making and linking ideas. Learners are to make sense of the ideas and action of science they use. Context stands for local setting or situation or event identified by the teacher. Decontextualization steals meaning out of learning. Context enables and encourages mind engagement and real learning in individuals. Using science concepts and skills in new context is taken as the best evidence of real learning. Collaboration is working together by connecting in classroom, community and national and global level. Unlike art, music and religion, science cannot be experienced and practiced by individual only. Collaboration between teachers and students, among leaders, among students and among as many as possible from those interested in problems of the day is a requirement for learning the nature of science. Now, let us summarize this session. Yager and Mccormack put forward taxonomy of 6 domains of science education. The 6 domains are concepts, processes, attitudes, creativity, application and nature of science. The significance of this taxonomy lies in helping connect science, technology and society. Connecting science with life and society requires 6 C's: curiosity, creativity, content, constructing meaning, context and collaboration. The essence of implication of these domains of learning and 6 C's can be summarized like this. Begin at the application and connection domain. Ensure that everything considered is student-centered and seen as useful to by students. Rather than beginning science teaching with organized knowledge and some processes, start it with applications, real issues and relevant questions, ideas that provide linkages and connections for students. Encourage students and self to join others, especially those who share their curiosities and propose solutions, and enter into debates with them. Teachers have to work cooperatively in the school, involving other teachers, administrators, parents and community leaders. Make the professional organizations places where ideas are shared and evaluated. Stop working like factory workers and engage in action researches. Now, there are some assignments for you to work out. Compare the 6 domains of science proposed by Yager et al. And the 6 categories of objectives proposed by Anderson et al. Evaluate the science education practices in India as envisaged in NCF 2005 in view of Yager's proposed domains and 6 C's. Now, there are a few references for your further study. Assessing Teaching Learning Successes in Multiple Domains of Science and Science Education by Yager R.E. and Mccormack A.J. published in 1989 in Science Education Journal. How are we stacking up? Current Reforms in Science Education by Yager R.E. in 2007, published in Iowa Science Teachers Journal. Both these articles are available online. Thank you for watching this session. Let us meet in another session with a new topic. Till then, bye.